Welcome to 304 Customs Garage. In this episode, we're going to be installing this Ford 8.8 rear end. We have a lot of information to cover, and this will be a two-part series. Stay tuned. Okay, so to touch base a little more on this little template that if you watched the last video, you'll recognize. In my current build, and after speaking with Caltracs Racing again and doing some more research myself, my current build, my truck is -2 degrees, pointing downhill at the transmission. Caltracs Racing suggests with their Caltracs, -2 to -4 degrees pinion angle between these 2 points when all 4 wheels are setting on the ground and the truck is not being moved. So, I'm sure that may be the same for some other vehicles too, but you might want to figure that out for your own setup. This is for an S10. This, I wrote rear up, opposite but the same. Yes and no. So forget that for now. And off of here, we're going to install this -2 degrees down. The reason for that is because of these 2 points, that gives us -4 degrees, -2 here, -2 here. Because under acceleration, your rear end is going to rise. I don't know how much that's going to cancel up. They suggested that for a starting point on this truck. And they said they may need to adjust it later with shims, which is fine. And if we break something, we do. It's a learning experience for me. So we're going to go with that. I just wanted to touch base and correct that information from the last video, first of all. But now we're going to go over here and start prepping to get this rear end put semi back together for now so we can get another truck and start getting that centered and angled in there so we can get the perches on. So we'll be right back. Okay, so I got everything put back together in here. One thing I don't have yet is obviously the C-clips on the axles. I don't have those back in yet. I'm going to wait to do that until we get the perches and everything, all that stuff figured out, and we start reassembling the actual rear end itself. But for now, I just wanted to put this in here for the weight, and I'm going to leave the axles in for when we do the measurements also. But put everything back on the same side that they came from. I put them in separate baggies and directions of what side went to where. Torqued the bolts to 80 foot-pounds. I think I did them in 4 increments. So I did 20, 40, 60, 80 for the bolts, all 4 bolts. And when I did this, I followed a series. It was called the Fabrication Series on how to narrow this rear end, as well as did some research on it. And I have to say that Fabrication Series on how to shorten this Ford 8.8 to use the passenger side axle on the driver's side by taking the 2 7/8 inch out of it was step-by-step fantastic. The only difference is I MIG welded mine. That was a TIG weld, and it turned out perfect. The measurement is exact, and the axles are straight. And that was using just a piece of C-channel iron that I picked up at like a local hardware store or Home Depot or something like that when I did it. So if you need help with that, I recommend checking that out. There's probably a few other good ones out there, but I definitely recommend that one. So if you have any questions on how we did that, there you go. But now we're going to jump out of the truck. I'm going to get this old rear end out. It's going to take me a little bit to get that. I'll get that off camera, and then we'll work on getting this in and start working on getting that angle right and centered. Okay, so we got the factory rear out of this S10 finally, and we removed the shocks, of course. We're going to put new shocks in this truck as well. We are going to be using the Ford brake lines, so I do have the adapter fitting, which we'll either cover in the next part of the video or a separate video, depending on how long these end up being. And the only other thing we need to do is a little bit of modification to these leaf springs. And what we're going to do here with these leaf springs is we're going to be first removing this overload leaf. And the reason I'm going to be doing that is because I want to soften up the rear end a little bit in this truck, and that should allow us to help traction better in conjunction with those Caltracs that we're going to be putting on here. And then on top of that, we're going to go ahead and, of course, clean that up, paint it, put a rust encapsulator coat or 2 on it. And then to help level out the back of the truck, we're going to be running this 2-inch Speedmaster steel block. Of course, it's not solid, but it is steel. Street truck, but I wanted to be street strip oriented. I didn't want to have the back end jacked up way in the air. So this is going to help level out the truck. And then on top of that, we're going to be running these Curry Enterprise spring perches for the 8.8. And there's a little part number inscribed here. It says CE7000B1. So that's the part number for that. These steel blocks actually have a 9/16 locating pin, and these spring perches that I purchased for this build, the hole was not quite big enough. So what I did is I just chucked it up in the drill press and the little vise real quick and drilled it out to 9/16. As you see now, it fits perfect. So we'll go ahead and get this bottom piece off, get the other side off, and then we'll get the rear end and we'll get that in here and we'll start working on centering that, getting that pinion angle set. So we'll be right back. Okay, so we got the rear end in. It's nice to see the rear end under the S10 project versus setting in the back of the garage like it has for the last year collecting dust. Just wanted to point that out there. And also remove this overload leaf on the leaf springs. Put a rust preventative coating between all the springs. And since we have this in here now, I've been working on getting this centered under the truck. And by doing that, what I've been doing is measuring the distance between the frame and this straight edge or yardstick, whatever you want to call it. And where I'm measuring from is this hole here that's on each side of the frame. I'm measuring the distance between that hole and the straight edge or yardstick, whatever you want to call it. And I still have about a 1/2 inch that I need to slide it towards the driver's side. And then we'll get the exact same measurement between here on both sides. So once I do that, then we'll go and grab the new U-bolts and the lower piece for the Caltracs that go underneath the leaf springs. And I'm going to snug everything up. And then we're going to drop this down off the jack stands. And I might either go get the rotors and put the wheels on the back, or I might just use the rear end and put a jack under it. And we're going to be working on setting the pinion angle. As you can see, I have the protractor on there already, ready to go for when we get there. So I'm going to go ahead and get this centered up, and we'll be right back with the U-bolts and the lower piece for the Caltracs. Okay, so to explain what I'm doing here next, as you can see, I have the wheels on the back of the truck now, in the rear. I finally got the rear end centered. And we have the spring perches on, and we also set the pinion angle with the weight on the wheels, according to what Caliber Racing suggested. And it's also on their website if you're curious to what guidelines I'm using. It's under the frequently asked questions section on there of pinion angle. So we're going to throw some tacks on this, and then we're going to take the bottom piece for the Caltracs and U-bolts back off, weld the perches completely. Then we're going to throw some rust encapsulator on this, a coat of paint, reassemble the rear shocks, Caltracs. That'll probably be in the next video. But for right now, we're gonna go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so since I had the wheels on, when I went ahead and welded the other side of this perch, I actually put 2 tacks on the inside of the perch to hold it on this side. And now what I'm gonna do is, of course, I put a couple more tacks, I tacked it in 3 places on this side. We'll go ahead and weld between the tacks, and then we'll do the other side, and we'll come back. We'll go over a couple more things. So let's get this welded. Welding on the driver's side perch, I actually stopped the video and I had to take my sock off because I got some sparks in there. And if anyone knows it's welded before, that does not feel good. So we got the perches on, and we'll let this cool down a little bit. They're still a little warm. And what we're going to do next is put a rust encapsulator from Eastwood coating on this rear end after we take the U-bolts and the Caltrac bottom pieces off. And then we're going to paint the rear, and then we're going to jump to part 2. So I encourage you to watch part 2, because in part 2 we're going to be putting everything back together. We're going to put the shocks in. We're going to be doing the bushing in the front for the Caltracs in the front, and then we're also going to be maybe preloading that, but that'll depend if I have my helper or not. But for now, I thank you for watching. As always, check out one of these other videos. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, give us a like, and we'll see you in part 2. Thanks for watching.